All right, let's jump into this deep dive. It's Acts 9, 1 to 2. And I know you're thinking, really, that one again. But stick with us. We're going deeper than just what the verse says.
Yeah, we're not doing Sunday school level stuff here. This is for pastors who need fresh angles, new sermon illustrations, stuff that'll make people actually lean in.
Exactly. So we've been digging through all these sermons, thanks to Pastor's Day I, and it's amazing how many different directions pastors take this passage.
Oh, it's fascinating, right? Like you think, okay, Acts 9, 1 to 2, we've heard it all, but then bam, some pastor hits you with resurrection
Who
imagery.
drops in some deep historical context. You wouldn't believe the stuff we found.
And even like personal family stories tied right into the message. It's wild how creative these pastors get.
Okay, so let's start with something we saw pop up a lot, this idea of transformative grace. But even that, every pastor had their own spin on it.
Yeah, like take New Dawn Church. They highlighted how Saul was both Jewish and Roman, like double the identity crisis going on.
Right, so it makes his conversion even more radical. It's not just, oh, I believe in Jesus now.
Yeah.
It's his whole world getting flipped.
And it makes you think about those people God uses, right? Like the ones we'd least expect. It's encouraging.
Oh, absolutely. And then, Evangelical Free Church. They went for a visual metaphor, Saul's journey to Damascus. It's like going from spiritual blindness to sight.
That's powerful, right? Because everyone's felt lost at some point, then found clarity. Like suddenly you can see. And to tie that to Saul, this huge figure.
Man, that'd grab anyone's attention.
Mm-hmm.
It's like those relatable moments that make these old stories come alive. You got to bring people into it.
100%. Now, Hope Midtown, totally different approach. They went all in on the historical side of Acts, like hardcore.
Yeah, they even quoted Josephus, that Jewish historian, just to solidify, like this stuff really happened, which honestly is smart these days.
Oh, for sure. When so many folks are skeptical of anything supernatural, you got to meet them where they're at. Start with the facts, then layer in the miracle.
It's like you're not attacking their intellect. You're inviting them to consider something new.
Yeah.
And they even went further, mentioning those famous scientists.
Oh, you mean Copernicus, Galileo, Newton? All those guys believed in miracles, too. Which blows some people's minds, I bet.
It's like dismantling that whole faith versus science thing, Like, belief isn't about rejecting evidence. It's about seeing it through a different lens.
Absolutely. Sometimes that lens is faith, and that's okay. So, to recap, we've got Saul's dual identity, the blindness to sight metaphor, and degrounding miracles in history.
That's just scratching the surface, though.
Yeah.
What other unique takes did you find?
Oh, there's plenty more. Northgate Church. They presented Saul's life as this total narrative shift, like going from law-focused to Greece-centered. Boom, new chapter.
I like that framework because it helps us see how personal transformation fits into God's big story. We're not just random events. It's all connected.
Exactly. We're part of this huge tapestry God's weaving. And speaking of profound change, Living Word Lutheran Church. They focused on the Greek anastasis.
Oh, yeah, the word for resurrection, which is more than just change. It's new life, like being born again. It gives Saul's conversion a whole new meaning.
Goes beyond just repenting, right? It's a total rebirth. And that's the core of the Christian message, really. We're all offered that chance through Christ.
Man, just thinking about Acts 9, 1 to 2 in these ways, my mind is already buzzing with possibilities.
That's the beauty of these deep dives, right? Even familiar passages can hit us with fresh revelation when we look through different lenses.
So we've got grace, identity, history, even the meaning of resurrection. What else jumped out at you from these sermons?
Oh, can't forget about Evangelical Free Church. They really emphasized Saul's zeal and authority before he met Jesus. Like, this guy wasn't just any persecutor.
Right. He was fully convinced, backed by the high priest. It adds a whole layer of complexity to his character. You start thinking, okay, this wasn't some mustache-twirling villain.
It makes his transformation that much more profound, right? Like, if this super zealous guy can change, anyone can. And then they tied that to the pastor's own family story.
His great-grandmother, yeah. And how her faith impacted generations later, even if she couldn't see it right away.
It's like a reminder that the ripple effects of faith, we can't always measure them. It's bigger than us. It makes you think about how we approach those who
oppose the church, yeah. Are we too quick to judge, or do we see that genuine conviction even if it's misguided?
Crucial question, because what if, instead of instantly writing people off, we tried understanding them first? Maybe that's how we plant the seeds for change, like with Saul.
It's a reminder that conversion stories, they're rarely simple. You've got conviction, doubt, and ultimately grace, all tangled up.
Well said. Now, want to get into the nitty-gritty of how these pastors used Scripture? Like the cross references they brought in to illuminate Acts 9, 1 to 2.
Oh, absolutely. That's where things get really juicy for me. Finding those unexpected connections, it's like a treasure hunt.
Okay, so one that really hit me was Philippians 3, 5, and 6, where Paul, he's reflecting on his Jewish background, and it adds this whole other level to his struggle.
Right, because it wasn't just changing his mind about Jesus, it's like potentially turning his back on his whole community, his heritage.
Exactly, a huge deal. And then you've got John 11, 25, and 26. Jesus says, I am the resurrection and the life. Ties in perfectly with that anastasis idea, right?
It's like taking it beyond just Saul's personal change. It points to that ultimate transformation, the one we all have access to through Christ.
It reminds us that this passage, it's bigger than just one guy's story. It's about the power of resurrection, period, changing lives forever.
And then there's Galatians 1:13. Paul looking back on his persecutor days. Imagine hearing that from the pulpit, the weight of those words.
Powerful stuff, right? Because it says no matter how far gone you think you are, redemption's still possible. It's a message of hope for anyone wrestling with guilt, shame.
And it shows just how completely grace can transform someone, which honestly is encouraging for us as pastors too.
100%. These cross-references, they're like threads connecting different parts of Scripture, making this richer tapestry of meaning.
Yeah, it makes you realize that sermon prep, it's not just finding a few points to preach. It's about uncovering those hidden depths, the layers of meaning.
It's like being a detective, a storyteller, building that bridge between the ancient world and today, showing how these timeless truths still apply.
Love that. Now, some of these pastors, they went even further. They brought in insights from like secular sources to shed more light on the passage.
Oh, yeah. Hope Midtown mentioned Craig Keener, that scholar who writes about modern-day miracles, adds a whole other level of credibility, especially for skeptical folks.
Like, hey, this isn't just ancient history. These things still happen. And it makes you wonder if we're limiting God by thinking miracles were just for Bible times.
Right. What if he's still working in supernatural ways today? And then Living Word Lutheran Church. They mentioned the LCMC and their focus on personal testimony.
I'm a big fan of that because
Huh.
it makes these big concepts like faith and transformation real and relatable. You hear someone's story and it opens your heart.
Yeah.
You know,
It's like, if God can do that for them, maybe he can do it for me too. Sometimes the best sermon illustrations aren't from commentaries, but from our own people.
exactly. Those real life stories of grace changing lives. And speaking of unexpected sources, Hope Midtown, using Copernicus, Galileo, Newton.
Oh yeah, the science guys, all believing in miracles. That one really messes with the narrative that science and faith have to be at odds.
Like some of the most brilliant minds in history saw no conflict between those two. It's like
Right.
the universe is big enough for both scientific inquiry and the spiritual awe.
Maybe the more we learn about the natural world, the more we marvel at the creator behind it all. And vice versa.
It's like this beautiful dance between reason and revelation, each one informing the other. And don't forget the power of personal stories in these sermons.
Oh, for sure. Like that pastor from Evangelical Free Church sharing about his great-grandmother and how her faith echoed down the generations.
That one hit me hard. It wasn't just some feel-good story. It was a real illustration of how faith can have these ripple effects even if we don't see them right away.
It's a reminder that we're part of something so much bigger, something that goes beyond what we can see or understand. And speaking of bigger questions,
There's one that keeps coming back to me as we dig into all these different interpretations of Acts 9, 1-2. It's this whole thing about Saul's conviction, right? Like, he was so sure of himself before he met Jesus. And it makes you wonder about those who oppose the church today.
yeah, are we so busy defending our own turf that we miss seeing their genuine belief, even if it's leading them down the wrong path?
Because Saul, before he was Paul, he was devout, a zealot for his cause. He wasn't just messing around. It came from a place of deep belief.
And it makes me think, what if we're missing chances for real dialogue? Like not just writing people off, but actually trying to understand where they're coming from.
It's hard though, right? Way easier to dismiss someone than to really engage.
Yeah.
But what if by doing that, we miss a chance to, I don't know, plant a seed like
Yeah.
God did with Saul?
It's humbling, for sure, to think maybe the folks we see as lost causes could be the next Pauls, the next big voices for the faith.
It's a good reminder that God's grace, it doesn't always show up where we expect it. And maybe our job isn't to judge, but to stay open to that possibility of change.
In ourselves and in those we disagree with. That's powerful stuff.
Man, this deep dive into Acts 9, 1-2 has been eye-opening. I feel like I'm seeing this passage with fresh eyes, thanks to these other pastors and what we found on Pastors AI.
It just shows you even familiar scripture can surprise us when we look at it from different angles.
Hopefully this sparks some new ideas for your next sermon or study.
That's what we're here for. And remember, it's not just about knowing the text, it's about letting it change us, challenge us, push us to live out our faith in real ways.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive, everybody. We'll leave you with this thought. How can we approach those who oppose us with the same grace God showed Saul? It's something to chew on as we figure out how to live out faith in today's world.